The courtroom is a stage. It's a place of high drama. The air is thick with tension. You can almost taste the fear in the room. On one side you have the victims' families. They're searching for closure, desperate for justice. Their lives have been shattered by unspeakable acts of violence. They sit in silence, their faces etched with grief, waiting for the final act. They need to see the person who destroyed their world held accountable for their terrible crimes. Their hope hangs on the words of a single person, the judge, who holds the scales of justice in their hands. On the other side, you have the accused, the defendant, the person whose freedom hangs in the balance. Their life is about to change forever, but now, the moment of truth has arrived. The jury has spoken, the verdict is in, guilty. Now, all that remains is the sentence, the final word that will seal their fate behind bars for the rest of their natural life. This is the moment I've seen time and time again, the moment the gavel falls. It's a sound that echoes with finality. It's in this exact instant that the mask often shatters. The pressure just becomes too much. The carefully constructed image of a calm, collected individual crumbles into dust. What is revealed underneath? Sometimes it's raw, explosive rage. Sometimes it's chilling, soulless indifference. And sometimes it's something so bizarre, so unexpected that it leaves everyone in the courtroom breathless, questioning what they just witnessed. Let's start with a man whose evil honestly knew no bounds. Joseph E. Duncan III. This was not just a criminal, this was a predator of the worst kind. He was a monster who targeted a family in Idaho, tearing them apart with sickening violence. He murdered 3 members of the Grown family. He then kidnapped the 2 youngest children, Shasta, Dylan Grown. For weeks he subjected them to unimaginable horrors before finally murdering young Dylan. It was a crime that shocked the nation to its core. A crime that left a scar on the heart of America. For the victims' families, the trial was an agonizing journey. They were forced to relive every horrific detail. They had to listen to the depraved acts Duncan committed. Through it all, they waited for one thing: justice. When the time for sentencing came, the courtroom was packed. The air was heavy. Everyone was bracing for the final judgment on a man who had forfeited his right to walk among us. The judge began to speak. Life in prison. Multiple life sentences, in fact, ensuring he would die behind bars. But as the judge condemned him to a lifetime of incarceration, something chilling happened. Joseph Duncan did not weep. He did not rage. He did not show a single ounce of remorse for the devastation he had caused. Instead, a slow, deliberate smirk spread across his face. Why was this so shocking? Because it was a look of pure, unadulterated evil. It was a look of victory. In that moment, Duncan wasn't a defeated man. He was gloating. The smirk was his final act of defiance, a silent taunt to the people whose lives he had shattered. It was the reaction of a man completely devoid of a soul, a monster who reveled in the pain he inflicted. It was a chilling confirmation that, honestly, some people are just born evil, and he was one of them. Now we turn to a different kind of evil, one that hides behind a familiar face, the face of a mother. Diane Staudte, a mom from Missouri, seemed ordinary. She played the organ at her church. She was a wife, she was a mother of 4. But behind this suburban facade, a dark and deadly secret was festering. Over several months she methodically poisoned her own family. She killed her husband, she killed her son. She attempted to kill one of her daughters, who was left with severe, life-altering injuries. Her motive? She claimed they were a burden. The investigation uncovered a horrifying plot. Diane, along with one of her daughters, had used antifreeze to carry out their wicked plan. They laced the family's drinks, slowly and cruelly ending their lives. The case went to court, and Diane Staudte eventually pleaded guilty to avoid the death penalty, accepting a sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole. On sentencing day, the courtroom was filled with a somber silence. As the judge formally handed down the life sentence, Diane Staudte stood motionless. Her face was a blank mask. But then her surviving daughter, the one she had tried to kill, was given the chance to speak. The young woman, left with permanent neurological damage from the poison, looked at her mother. She spoke of forgiveness. She spoke of love. It was a moment of incredible grace in the face of unimaginable betrayal. And that's when Diane Staudte's cold exterior finally broke. But it wasn't with remorse. As her daughter spoke of love, Diane began to sob uncontrollably. Not for her victims, but for herself. She turned to the judge, and through her tears she begged, "I don't want to die in prison," she cried. "I don't want to." Some monsters don't hide in the shadows. They live right next door. Ariel Castro was one of those monsters, Michelle Knight, Amanda Berry, Gina D. Jesus. For a decade he kept 3 young women imprisoned in his Cleveland home. He chained them up, he starved them, he subjected them to relentless abuse. His house of horrors was a prison hidden in plain sight on a normal residential street. The world was shocked when the women were finally discovered, their miraculous escape bringing Castro's decade of terror to a screeching halt. The case against him was overwhelming, the evidence was undeniable. To avoid a trial that would have forced his victims to testify, Castro took a plea deal. He was sentenced to life in prison plus 1,000 years, a sentence designed to make it crystal clear that he would never, ever, see the light of day again. At his sentencing hearing he was given the opportunity to speak. It was his chance to apologize, to show some glimmer of humanity, to express remorse for the lives he had stolen and the pain he had caused. But Ariel Castro did not apologize. Instead, he delivered a rambling, defiant and self-pitying speech that left the courtroom aghast. He stood before the judge and claimed he was not a monster. He tried to justify his actions. He blamed his crimes on a porn addiction. He said he was a sick person. He had the audacity to try and paint himself as a victim. He talked about his own loneliness. He talked about his own struggles, as if that could somehow explain away a decade of torture and imprisonment. He wasn't sorry for what he did. He was sorry he got caught. He was a monster to the very end. The trial of Jodi Arias was pure spectacle. Honestly, it was a media circus from day one. Arias was on trial for the brutal murder of her ex-boyfriend, Travis Alexander. He had been stabbed nearly 30 times. His throat was slit. He had been shot in the head. Arias first denied any involvement, then claimed self-defense, weaving this complex and contradictory web of lies. The trial was televised, and millions watched as the drama unfolded. A toxic story of obsession, jealousy, deadly violence. Arias took the stand in her own defense for 18 days. She presented herself as a victim, a battered woman who had been forced to kill to save her own life. She was calm, she was articulate, and at times, even charming. She seemed to have an answer for everything. Her performance was calculated, designed to manipulate the jury and the public. For months, she maintained this carefully crafted persona, but as the trial reached its conclusion, the jury delivered a guilty verdict for first-degree murder. The pressure began to mount. Her fate was now in the hands of that same jury for the penalty phase. The moment of sentencing was broadcast live. The jury had spared her the death penalty, but the judge was about to sentence her to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As the judge confirmed her fate, that she would spend the rest of her days behind bars, Arias stood there listening. And then something utterly bizarre happened. A faint smile appeared on her lips. It grew into a quiet, almost imperceptible chuckle. She was laughing. For 2 decades, a shadow loomed over Washington state, the Green River Killer. He was one of America's most prolific serial murderers, preying on vulnerable women and girls. He left a trail of death and heartbreak. The police hunted for him relentlessly, but he was like a ghost, always one step ahead. Families waited year after year for answers. The community lived in fear. The name became synonymous with terror. Then, in 2001, a breakthrough. DNA evidence pointed to one man, Gary Ridgway. A truck painter with a quiet, unassuming life. He was married. He went to work every day. He seemed completely normal, but he was the monster they'd hunted for 20 years. To avoid the death penalty, Ridgway made a deal. He would confess to all of his murders. He would lead investigators to victims' remains, giving long-awaited answers to families. He pleaded guilty to 48 counts of murder, though suspected of many more. At his 2003 sentencing, the courtroom filled with victims' families. One by one they stood and addressed him, daughters, sisters, mothers. They poured out decades of pain, anger, grief. Through it all, Ridgway sat silent and emotionless. He listened, his face a blank slate. Then, when it was his turn, the unexpected happened. Ridgway broke down.
I'm sorry for the women that I killed.
For 30 years, the city of Wichita, Kansas was haunted by a phantom. He called himself BTK. It stood for Bind, Torture, Kill. That was his signature. From 1974 to 1991, he murdered 10 people, terrorizing the entire community. He sent taunting letters to the police and media, reveling in his crimes and the fear he created. Then he went silent for over a decade. The case went cold. People wondered if he had died or just moved away. But in 2004 the letters started again. BTK's ego couldn't handle being forgotten. Through a floppy disk he sent to a local news station, police were able to trace him. The boogeyman had a name: Dennis Rader. He was a church council president, a Boy Scout leader, a husband, and a father. He was hiding in plain sight, a pillar of his community. The revelation sent shockwaves through Wichita and honestly the entire country. Rader's sentencing was a major event. He had pleaded guilty, and because his crimes were committed before Kansas reinstated the death penalty, the maximum he could receive was multiple life sentences. His reaction was a cold, empty stare. His cold stare was his final, silent testament to the evil that lived within him. Not every life sentence is met with a reaction inside the courtroom. Sometimes, the most shocking response comes later, in the cold silence of a prison cell. Aaron Hernandez had it all. He was a gifted athlete, a star tight end for the New England Patriots. He had a multi-million-dollar contract, fame, a bright future ahead of him. He was living the American dream. But beneath the surface of his celebrity lifestyle, a dark and violent side was festering, a side that would lead to his spectacular downfall. In 2013, Hernandez was arrested for the murder of Odin Lloyd. Odin Lloyd, a semi-pro football player. He was dating the sister of Hernandez's fiancée. The case was a media frenzy. How could a beloved sports hero be involved in such a brutal crime? The trial laid bare Hernandez's secret life: guns, paranoia, violence. Despite his high-powered legal team, the evidence was damning. In April 2015, a jury found him guilty of first-degree murder. In Massachusetts, that carries a mandatory sentence: life without the possibility of parole. When the verdict was read, Hernandez's reaction was stunned disbelief. Let out in handcuffs, destined to spend the rest of his days locked away, the fall from grace was absolute and final. 5 days after being acquitted of a separate double murder trial in 2017, and with his appeal for the Odin Lloyd murder pending, Aaron Hernandez was found dead in his cell. He had taken his own life. The courtroom is more than just a place of law. It is a crucible. It's where human nature is put under the most extreme pressure imaginable. The finality of a life sentence, the knowledge that you will never again know freedom, that you will grow old and die in a cage, is a weight that few can bear with composure. In these critical moments, the masks we all wear are ripped away. That moment revealed something terrifying about the human capacity for evil, narcissism, deceit. It's a raw, unfiltered look into the abyss. We saw the chilling smirk of Joseph Duncan, a man who found victory in his own damnation. We saw the selfish tears of Diane Staudte, a mother who mourned only for herself. We heard the defiant excuses of Ariel Castro, a monster who refused to acknowledge his own evil until the very end. We witnessed the bizarre laughter of Jodi Arias, a performer whose final act was one of unsettling madness. These reactions are not just courtroom oddities, they are windows into the souls of people who have crossed a line from which there is no return. These moments serve as a stark reminder. A reminder that justice is not just about locking someone away, it's about accountability. It's about seeing these individuals for who they truly are, stripped of their lies and manipulations. The reactions of these convicts, whether it be a cold stare, a shocking confession, a final act of cowardice, give us a glimpse of the truth. It's often a disturbing truth, one that confirms our worst fears about the darkness that can reside in the human heart. It shows us what happens when there is no conscience, no empathy, no remorse. Ultimately, the gavel's fall does more than just sentence a criminal. It delivers a final, undeniable judgment on their character. And we must never forget them.